There is a concept in biology called community selection. Multiple species are surviving in the same community, and some species may be competing with each other for the same resources. For example, let's look at these birds. In this community, there are two species of birds, pink birds and blue birds. Both birds' diets consist of worms and seeds. Because both species need this limited resource, their food, to survive, it creates competition between the two species. However, as time goes on, the bluebird species population has more birds with stronger beaks for eating seeds, and the pink bird species has more birds with sharper beaks for grabbing worms. This is an example of character displacement. Both bird species adapted a trait, their beak type, over time to be better fit for monopolizing over one type of food. Now, in this community, there is less competition between these two species of birds, and both species are more successful. If one species had dominated over the other species in collection of seeds and worms, then the other species may have died out. This would have decreased the overall diversity of the community. A research study called Community Selection Increases Biodiversity Effects was done, which explains how species adapting to shared resources in an environment are better off, creating a stronger, more biodiverse community. This experiment was modeled off another more famous experiment called the Jenna experiment.
In order to perform this experiment, 48 experimental plant communities were made from 12 communities each of 1 species, 2 species, 4 species, and 8 species. Biodiversity was quantified in each plant community by creating 2 groups of unique selection history. The first group was naive, which meant that it had no common selection history. The second group was selected, which meant that plants from these communities had 8 years of shared community selection. The seeds for the selected communities were obtained from a previous Jenna experiment, which ran from 2002 to 2010, where plants were grown over many generations into symbiotic communities. The seeds for naive communities were obtained from the same source of seeds as the selected communities were originally from. Seeds were germinated in a greenhouse in Zurich in mid-January 2011. Each of the 48 types of plant communities were individually tested in a 2x2 meter subplot. The plant density of each subplot was 210 plants per cubic meter. The bottom of each subplot contained 2 5-centimeter layers of sand separated by a 0.5 millimeter mesh net to prevent soil contamination. The borders between quadrats were separated by plastic frames. 3 types of soil were used in individual quadrats: gamma-sterilized novel soil, gamma-sterilized native soil, unsterilized. The 4th quadrat was not used in this study. Beet soil was used in gamma soil to create a natural and basic soil community as a kind of control. Each quadrat in each subplot was divided in half so that one could test the strength of selected communities and the other could test the strength of naive communities.
The hypothesis for the Swiss experiment was that communities with shared selection history have a stronger biodiversity effect than the communities without shared selection history. Each year of the experiment, the plant material was harvested so the plants would be 3 centimeters above the ground. Then the material was dried at 70 degrees centigrade and weighed in order to find the biomass of the plant material. Statistical analysis, including ANOVA testing for significance, was done on the 4 spring harvests from 2012 to 2015. The biomass and the number of species were compared for the experimental setup. Selected plant communities were found to be more productive than naive plant communities. The plants in this experiment support the hypothesis that the communities with selection history produce a greater amount of biomass than those naive communities.
Overall, the study showed that communities with a history of shared selection have a greater effect on biodiversity than those without the shared selection history. In other words, the communities that had spent 8 years together maintained a more diverse selection than communities with no prior interaction. The benefits of biodiversity are plentiful, one of which includes that biodiverse communities are less susceptible to pathogens. In class, we discussed how the flavor that we associate with the bananas we eat currently is different from the banana flavor our parents ate. In fact, the artificial banana flavoring is the old banana flavor. As these bananas lack diversity, they were easily wiped out by a single pathogen. A study done on visualization of genome diversity in German Shepherd dogs showed a loss of genetic diversity may lead to an increased disease risk in subpopulations of dogs. Therefore, diversity reduces the disease risk. This further supports the claim of this article that diversity is beneficial. Lastly, research done on biodiversity and ecosystem functioning found that larger numbers of species are needed, or else the ecological consequences of biodiversity loss will have a profound impact on the Earth's ecosystem. Thus, a lack of biodiversity isn't good. In conclusion, 2 ropes tied together are stronger, and biodiversity makes communities stronger.